Earth, 2019. Dominant species, human. Galactic potential rating, 0. Cultural affiliation, combination of government and global businesses, corporatism, legacy institution. Species still conservative, superstitious, and religious. Ecologically illiterate, largely unaware of cosmological foundation of love. Level of technological dependence is disturbingly higher than the galactic standard. Species distracted and behavior controlled by technology companies. System error. Advanced concepts detected beyond normal human levels. New galactic potential rating, over 9,000. Transmission type, podcast. Host, the man of tomorrow. Brian Sovryn. Source, Sovryn Tech.
Oh, the Golden Stallion is back for you, baby. The man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the thriller that is Savzilla. And yeah, you know, obviously you're hearing, just like last week, I'm back on my handy dandy little webcam here. But I'll tell you, and I've said this before, actually, because there's been a lot of times where over the years, I mean, Sovryn Tech's been going, we've been going 7 years now. There have been times where people ask me, you know, podcasting questions, how to go about podcasting, what equipment to use and all this. And I've been straight up and I said, I can't believe there are podcasts out there with listeners in the, you know, I have listeners in the 5 digits, okay, with listeners in the 6 digits, maybe even the 7 digits, where I know for a fucking fact that they are using, sometimes they're using like this shitty either Android or iPhone microphone. I mean, you can hear it. It's so bad. They'll do whole interviews with this setup. And the audio is horrible. And now they won't do it every week, just like every week I'm sure as fuck not going to do, you know, this show off of my webcam. But I mean, it's insane, you know, that you'll get these 2-hour interviews that are done on the worst audio equipment ever. But I guess because of the name cachet of the podcast, nobody seems to care. Or if they do care, I don't know, they go back next week or whatever. But so, you know, the reason I say this, or maybe because the interview is that hot, right? Maybe it's not name cachet, just the interview is that hot. The point is that content is king. Okay, if context is for kings, let me assure you, content is king. And that is the most important thing. Now, you can't have like really shitty audio. Okay, like if I was doing this off of my laptop's, you know, microphone, that you know, the built-in microphone, that'd be a very different situation. But this is, you know, a fairly high-end webcam here or it's actually a 1080p. It's really meant for streaming, for like game streaming. So, you know, they're not messing around as far as that goes. But next week, again, should be back into place, you know, getting that nice, as some people would call creamy audio. All right? I'll make sure you hear my melodious voice in all of its gloriousness, or in all of its glory. Gloriousness is not a word. Anyway, wow. So why don't we get into the show? But just so you know, yeah, if you're wondering about the audio quality, don't worry. We'll get right back to the good stuff. Anyway, going to try and get to a couple stories here in the opening, and then we got a couple stories for HackSec as well. Going to try to get to all the segments this week, even though, you know, a lot of people have really enjoyed, and I toyed with this when Sovryn Tech went back to the hour format from the 2-hour format. I said, you know, some shows will be different than others. And a lot of Sovryn Tech listeners and Sovryn Tech patrons were very interested in, you know, okay, yeah, maybe do different, you know, different segments, different weeks, things like that. A lot of you have really given me the feedback. where you've really appreciated like these single topic episodes, or episodes where we only get into a couple topics, but they're very much related. And those have been going on for, the past month. There have been a couple of them, 2-3 of them here. And a lot of you have really liked that one single topic that just covers, a major deal. Now, I'm not going to say that there's enough topics that, I would talk about that fit within the Sovryn Tech format that would be worthwhile, where every week I would do that sort of thing. But I think to shake it up every once in a while, when a subject ends up taking, 40, 50 minutes, hey, great. Why not? I'm totally down for that. So anyway, but this week I would like to get into more than one story, but a lot of people really loved last week's episode, and I'm really honored by that. Please always feel free to send in your feedback. I love to know what you think about the show, or if you have comments about it. In fact, got a lot of comments about the recent episode, but I'm going to address those in the Wednesday Q&A that I do for Sovryn Tech patrons. And of course, if you want to become a Sovryn Tech patron, you go to sovryntech.com, Sovryn tech.com, to get your hookup for that. But anyway, let's open this up. Just a fun little story here, and then maybe we can get into something a little more serious. Windows 95. I know, you weren't expecting me to say Windows 95. But we talked about this, I guess, back in August last year, 2018. We're in 2019 now, February of 2019. And Windows 95, there was a guy, Felix Reiseberg, who he released an Electron app, which Electron is a Chrome compatibility like cross-platform framework where, Signal, the desktop app for Signal runs using Electron. Basically, when Google's Chrome browser, when Google said we're not going to allow apps, now they still allow extensions, okay, like uBlock Origin and others, even though time might be up on those as well. But that's a whole other story. But when a couple of years ago, and we reported on this when they first announced it, they said, come 2018, we are not going to allow apps, which is like software designed more for Chromebooks that can work within Chrome. We're not going to let them work on any platform other than Chromebooks, basically. Though actually they might still work on Linux, but I don't use Chrome on Linux, so I'm not sure. But anyway, when they said they would cancel that, there were a lot of apps that were very popular that people used on Windows machines and Mac machines, including, say, the Signal app, where, what were they going to do? Like, okay, now we have to completely rewrite our app. We originally wrote it for Chrome, and now it's, this is going to suck. And so what ended up getting created was the Electron platform, okay, which is a software platform that allows you to take generally Chrome apps and just package them in a way to where they work like an individual piece of software, much like traditional software would, your Photoshops and otherwise, and allow it to, just work as is. Now, Felix here actually took Windows 95 and turned it into an Electron app. Now, I want to say out of the gate, there are not security concerns so much with the Electron platform. However, the Electron platform's so new that I have concerns over the, how well this Electron's actually been hammered. So just putting that out there, that I do have those concerns, and, the only time's going to tell. I really wish that people would write stuff outside of Electron. I wish the Signal app would be written in more native libraries than using Electron. But I digress. So anyway, this is interesting. We talked about this in August, and I tested it out then, and I thought it was fucking awesome. And what this is it really is. You just, almost like working in a virtual machine on your desktop, you can download, and link is in the show notes, to the GitHub for it, and it works on Linux, macOS, works on Windows, works all across. And that's thanks, of course, to the Electron platform, which is cross-platform. But Felix came out with version 2 of the Windows 95 app, and now you can really do stuff with it. Before, it was just like, wow, what an interesting look into, the past, right? Which unbelievably is over 20 years ago, right? But before, it was just like, well, this is Windows 95. Oh, this works. So you can have fun with this. And maybe you can save something after you wrote it in, WordPad or whatever was available at the time. But no, he has not stopped. And he went all out with version 2. In fact, version 2 now has a web browser built into it. But of all ironies, I've tested this out. It's brilliant. I've been using it, and actually I love using it. And I'll explain why. But Anyway, he put in Netscape Navigator version 2.0. It's not even Internet Explorer. He put in Netscape Navigator. I think that's genius. I mean, like, I remember like the first websites that I ever made. In fact, more about that. But the first websites I ever made when I was a teenager in the 90s. Okay, I was using Windows 95, and I was using Netscape Navigator at the time. And I made the websites right within Netscape Navigator. Like that used to be a thing that web browsers allowed for, was they'd have a built-in web page builder. And I built Battlestar Galactica websites at the time, for the original Battlestar Galactica. Obviously, it was 1995 or, 96, you know what I mean? And not 2005 when that horseshit, I don't know, whatever, Ron Moore, that idiot, he made that new crap of Battlestar Galactica. No, I'm talking about the real one, the one that's actually worth watching. That one. I checked that. I mean, and I would make all websites on it right within Netscape Navigator and everything. And some of that functionality is in Netscape Navigator 2.0. But now, more interestingly, is Felix bundled in some other software into Windows 95 version 2.0, as it's being titled. He put in. Oh, let's see. So there's Front Page. Microsoft Front Page is there. Front Page Server is there. Also, it now comes with Doom built in. Even though if you really want to play Doom, you install GZ Doom and you get your WAD files and you do the business. Wolfenstein 3D's there. A10 Tank Killer, Grand Prix Circuit. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, and it has pretty much doubled in size from what it originally was. Originally, it was about 130 meg. The running the entirety of Windows 95 was 130 meg, which is true. I mean, even with software installed, like my initial computer, which was my 486DX that I put Windows 95 on, only had a 250 megabyte, not gigabyte. That's standard today, 250 gigabyte, but no, 250 megabyte hard drive. That's what it had in it, and that's what ran Windows 95. Now with what he has installed, I think it clocks in at about 270 megs. That wouldn't have been able to run on my 486. But regardless, it runs beautifully on just about any desktop and modern desktop computer and desktop environment that you have. And it's really cool to use a lot of this different software. I mean, this is getting more and more full-featured. And the thing that I love about this, and I talked about this back in August last year when version 1.0 came out of the Windows 95. I mean, I don't want to call it a virtual machine, but anyway, when it first, when it came out, I was like, the amazing thing is that when you go back to using Windows 95, when you just look at it, because at the time in August, you could only look at it. Now there's a lot more to it. It's a lot more fleshed out, and you could do things that a lot more with software from its day. He didn't put in modern software at all, but with software from its day, you realize you don't need anything more than Windows 95. And the fuck you don't. I mean, you really don't. You don't need anything more than Windows 95. Everything since Windows 95 has really been, well, pun intended, window dressing. I mean, it really has. Like there is no point whatsoever to everything else that, okay, there's some niceties in that, there's some security, blah, blah, blah. But by and large, when you use Windows 95 and you have Netscape Navigator and all that, you realize just how little you actually need and how little you actually use on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty incredible. And having Microsoft Front Page there, that's kind of cool too, because then you can make websites like it's the 1990s. And frankly, I think websites look better in the 1990s than they do now, and they make sense, and there's a logic to them. And there's no fluff, no cruft. In fact, I mean, really, modern websites are running into trouble from the web browser companies themselves because all the fluff, and it really is just fluff, all of the fluff that they put into their websites has all turned into security exploits, has all turned into, all these problems to have this active content, which Microsoft learned that lesson a long time ago. Whether they stop supporting or not is another question. But regardless, the 90s websites, I mean, it was just very basic. And, you could lock that shit down because the code was so simple. And I don't know, I think there's a beauty to this. I'm not saying Windows 95 is the greatest operating system of all time. It might be the most influential, perhaps, or maybe Windows XP would fall more under that. But it's a joy to use. I mean, it's really something to mess with again, and just to see how far we actually haven't come with operating systems. Anyway, I'm going to take a break here. We'll be right back with more. Hey, you want to rock it like it's 1995, baby? Let me tell you what you do. You go, no, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do to rock it like it's 1995, but you never really have to leave the 90s. In fact, if you want to talk about stuff from the 90s, here's a great thing to do. And believe me, there's guys on there who I know they can talk up the 90s like there's no tomorrow, because I've done it with them. And that is Free Talk Live. It is an open phones call show. You call in show. You got to check it out. freetalklive.com is the website. It is the number 27 talk show in the United States. How could you not get excited about getting in on that? And I mean, all kinds of people could call in and respond to what you're talking about. It's a great time. freetalklive.com. Check it out. Go to the website, and I thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, where we talk issues of hacking and security, and oh baby, this is actually slightly older story from into about mid-January of 2019, but I want to bring it up because it raises a point. It raises a very important point. And then we have another bit of news to get into for HackSec as well. And by the way, that second story that I want to do for Story of the Week, we're going to talk a little more Jeff Bezos and the saga that is continuing with that, but I'm going to save that for the climax at the end of the show. So we will get into that because I think that is also very important to talk about. That's going to be a developing case, and I think it's actually raising some very fascinating issues within the tech industry, the news industry, but then also culture and society in general. So I do want to get into that. But anyway, with HackSec here, open this baby up. So it was found out, it was actually by a security researcher named Elliot Alderson. He found a vulnerability in a very, very popular app, a very popular Android app called ES File Explorer. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this is twofold. One is that for many years, I recommended to people, personally even, not just on Sovryn Tech, but personally, using ES File Explorer. Now, we've known for some years, and kind of when I stopped talking about it, though this isn't exactly the reason that I stopped talking about it, but we've known for some years that it was bought out by a company out of China. People have concerns around that. In fact, now there's reports coming out that, holy shit, there's going to be actually a ban on telcos utilizing or even selling, nobody knows the exact extent of the ban, that President Trump, that moron, is going to be putting out there against Huawei and ZTE phones. Like, telcos won't be able to either apparently even use them or sell them. I mean, it's kind of up to debate what this legislation is going to end up looking like, but there's pretty heavy rumors about it. I mean, that's a crazy case in itself. But regardless, that wasn't the reason that, this being bought by a Chinese company wasn't my number one concern. My biggest concern more was that just the original developers were out of the story. I loved ES File Explorer because it had a unique ability that I still don't know that any other, and it is exactly what it says. It's a file explorer app, right? Which not every phone years ago, I mean, we're talking over the past decade, shall we say, of Android phones, not every phone at the time had a file explorer app where it's like, just like in Windows, right? You have a file explorer where you can find your picture files and your movie files and whatever else you happen to be looking for. That was not a standard thing. Some companies would come with them stock, they'd come with their own, but Android itself, it kind of had one built in, but not really. So a lot of people would install these third-party file explorer apps, and ES File Explorer was probably one of the most popular ones. In fact, they even had a paid version that was pro. And the unique ability that it had is that it had the send to Kindle feature, okay, like as in a Kindle e-reader, where you could send an EPUB, or in this case a Mobi file, or an AZW3 file, whatever, Kindle a compatible file format, PDF, go down the list. You could send that to your Kindle e-reader. I loved this capability. Okay, like I really did, because I have my Kindle Oasis, my second generation Kindle Oasis. I mean, I use that daily. Okay, and I mean, I read, like a wolf eats. So you got to understand that, like, I take books very seriously, and I'm constantly getting my hands on EPUBs and PDFs, or getting my own made, from Rare Books, which I like to provide that service, and because no one else is. So, and I'm an anarchist, so I don't give a shit about laws. I'll I'll get these books copied all day long, and the person that I go through to do it, they don't care either. So, good for them. Well, they kind of care, but anyway, that's another story. So that send to Kindle feature was really still, I would still install this app up until recently, because that send to Kindle feature was such a killer feature for any other file explorer on Android. But anyway, let me read a little bit about the exploit, and then we can kind of get into it a little bit more. So anyway, Elliot Alderson is the one that found it, and I'm actually reading from a story from Android Police here. According to Alderson, ES File Explorer launches an HTTP server. Now, again, that's HTTP, not HTTPS, on port 59777. This leaves your phone wide open to anyone on the local network with enough knowledge to exploit it. An attacker can use that port to inject a JSON payload. They can get information about the apps and files you have, and then it's a simple matter to download your data over the network. Anyway, so, and Elliot Alderson breaks all of this down. We're talking about an app here that has over 100 million downloads. That's not even counting the pro version that came out years ago. And apparently the devs for ES File Explorer have fixed the vulnerability. But then there's some people still saying, in fact, here's an update from the story, and there hasn't really been an update since. I'm going to read it here from Android Police. While it was good to hear that a fix was in the works, we still had questions. And in particular, was the HTTP vulnerability. The devs mentioned the primary file access one, or it could be focused on the man-in-the-middle attack that also emerged as the story developed. Based on what they're telling us now, both of these glitches may have been resolved. And basically they said, quote, the issue of unauthorized copying of files has been fixed by removing the corresponding code. The way a man-in-the-middle attack is avoided by way the server upgrades, end quote. Android Police goes on, we feel like something's getting a little lost in translation on that man-in-the-middle bit, so we'll keep you posted if we learn anything else. So anyway, the latest version is version 4.1.9.9 of ES File Explorer. Make sure you at least have that, but they may not have actually addressed these concerns, okay? And being lost in translation, well, maybe they got it in Chinese, in Mandarin, and they're not exactly sure that everything was exactly that they completely understood what flaws there were. So regardless of that, here's the thing, is that now, particularly with, I think Oreo has it built into it, or 8.1 has it built into it, but they might still be calling it Files Go. Android 9, or Android Pie, depending on what you want to call it, does have it built in. Google created a Files app. Okay, and it's just called Files. It used to be called Files Go because it was a part of the Android Go operating system initiative, which is one of the worst ideas. Actually, it's a great idea in the abstract. It's one of the worst implementations of an idea by companies ever. Okay, and it raises. I talked about this months ago when I did a full review of the Nokia 2 with Android Go on it, and I explained the issues and concerns, and that we still don't have answers to a lot of those questions that I asked about Android Go. Regardless, the Files app itself is really solid. It was kind of in beta, not anymore. It's there. You can access SD cards. It does a cleanup job. I don't even install, I used to install SD-Made, okay, which was a long-standing app that would clean your cache and get rid of a lot of unnecessary files and everything. Really, the Files app from Google itself does all of that now right inside of Android. I see no real reason to use the ES File Explorer app anymore. I don't use my phone really to send any kind of PDFs or other files to my my Kindle anymore. The main reason I was doing that at the time was because I was experimenting. This was years ago, obviously. I was experimenting with, can you get away with not actually using a computer? Can you actually do everything you want to do and be creative as fuck while using a smartphone? Well, the reality around that is a whole other situation. That was the main reason that I was doing that, is I needed something, because I did use my Kindle e-reader so much. I needed, something that could have that functionality. But now I can just do that from my desktop, where I can do send to Kindle. You can even just email the file to yourself if you really need to. But that's besides the point. The point that I'm raising to you is that we talked about this in the past couple weeks on Sovereign Tech, that, you really want to use as few apps as possible. Just use as few apps as possible, because every app, like the ES File Explorer app, which at one point was necessary. Like, it wasn't necessary, you could say a necessary evil, but it was actually pretty good in its early days. If Android itself from Google, and this is very helpful if you have like an Android 1 phone, which I think everybody should, that way they're getting the latest security updates and everything, and you're not paying out of your ass for a Pixel phone. If Android has an app built into it, or even from the manufacturer, if you have an Asus phone or something like that, and because they would have a files app, if they have their own file manager, just use that. And even if it's a little clunky, just use that, because installing more apps is just opening you up to all kinds of danger, okay, in my opinion. So what's there, especially if it's already so deeply integrated into Android, like, say, the Files app is from Google, I recommend just going with that. I'm not saying to trust Google. I'm just saying don't trust anybody else more than, either, okay? So don't bother installing it, because, again, the more you install, the more potential exploits there are. And that's really the moral of this story. And also to say that, if just for an update, if you need a file explorer app of some kind, you don't need to go anywhere else other than what's already built for Android by the maintainers of Android, that being Google, and just go with the Files app going forward. And it has a lot of really, really slick features. I'm actually very impressed by the Files app. And in fact, it's a lot more than what it was when I reviewed it months ago with Android Go, when it was just called Files Go. It's full featured now. I mean, there's really, in fact, like I said, I knocked out 2 apps. Now I don't need ES File Explorer. Now I don't need SD card made either. Now, speaking of, shall we say, Android Go and kind of lower end phones, Google is also coming up with a new method of storage encryption, okay? And they're calling it Adiantum, or Adiantum. It sounds like it's trying to be like, adamantium, right? Or adamantium. Yeah, sorry, not adamantium. Adamantium. Like it's trying to be like Wolverine's claws, right? Adiantum. It's such a weird looking word. Adiantum. This is basically trying to not just Android Go, but on any low power device. Now, people have known for years, Android has had encryption baked into it. Encryption that works both on the, internal storage on your, device, as well as the SD card. Okay. And the encryption that it has involved is very solid. The thing is that encryption also, because it is so solid and takes up processes, really can slow down your phone. So Android's present encryption scheme is completely, it's just way out of line to run and out of class to run on, say, something that is like an Android Go phone, say, where you only have 1 gig of RAM, or, your processor is very low end or something. Or perhaps more interestingly, an encryption that can work on a smartwatch. Now, it's interesting that Adiantum, I'm going to try and call it that Adiantum encryption, which is designed to be this very fast, even though, kudos to Google's developers, because they even said, look, we know that this is a new form of encryption, and we know that new forms of encryption raise concerns because they haven't been hammered on by the geeks and by the security researchers and so on. So at least they're honest about that. I really appreciate that. This is a concern that comes up around Telegram, right? Is that like the MT protocol, while it's open source now, people, it hasn't been hammered on, and the people that have looked at it aren't impressed at all. Adiantum, okay. At least they're being honest about the fact that this is very new. But I think really what brought this on maybe isn't so much Android Go phones, but perhaps the smartwatch, because there have been job postings. And we've talked about this over the years, the importance of looking at the tech giants. Look at their job posting sites, because you can kind of tell the future of what they might be developing just by looking at their job posting sites, which are generally public. And like, this is how we found out about, Facebook making BCIs, like we were talking about in last week's episode, brain computer interfaces and so on, because they were hiring people to do this sort of thing. And it would appear that based upon some hiring and some other things going on at Google, that Google themselves are going to internally make a smartwatch. This shouldn't surprise anybody. The ultimate aim of, say, Google Assistant, of course, is to get past using a screen, right, where you completely use your voice. I am somewhat supportive of the concept of a smartwatch. Obviously, I'm not supportive of really much of anything Google does, but regardless, I get the sense that maybe Adiantum is more about encryption on a smartwatch. And that'd be a pretty major selling point, frankly. Like if you stored files, say music file, or I don't know, pictures, whatever. Of course, camera on a smartwatch, that's one of the big questions, right, of why it could never really, or one of the big question marks as to why wouldn't a smartwatch ever, overtake the smartphone? And that's because the smartphone makes, by a lot of people's metric, a damn fine camera. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but that's, how some people feel about it. So anyway, Adiantum, I'm supportive of this. Let's work on much smoother, faster encryption that doesn't slow down your device. Again, there is this, mixing of Android and Chrome OS perhaps coming together into Fuchsia or something like that. Maybe Adiantum is going to be a part of Fuchsia. But either way, fast encryption schemes is a wonderful thing. So, overall, I'm pretty excited about this. We'll see how it takes shape going into the future, but it is definitely something that's coming. So anyway, that's it for HackSec this week. I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo!
From Big Finish Productions, Blake 7, The Classic Audio Adventures.
I'm taking Liberator in on manual. We'll be in teleport range in 2 minutes.
What the hell was that?
Information. Liberator has been attacked.
You don't say.
Put up the force wall. Confirmed.
Message to all ground commanders. Initiate the final phase. Let's crush these rebels once and for all.
My name is Avon. Kerr Avon.
Kerr Avon.
Our hostage arrives, which may be unnecessary.
As a hostage, it's nice to be superfluous.
You can go to blake7.com to find more of the new adventures of one of science fiction's greatest masterpieces, Blake 7, at blake7.com.
This week in blockchain.
Oh, we're going to talk up some blockchain. So this is, a lot of people asked me, they said, hey, Stallion, could you please talk about, how do you even pronounce this? QuadrigaCX, I guess, QuadrigaCX. Their CEO, Gerald Cotten, apparently dead. I say apparently. A lot of people ask me about that. I am trying to sit on this one because there are more and more details coming out that are looking a little more and more strange about whether or not this guy actually died. Because basically he died, he supposedly had the only key for all of the crypto stored on this exchange, that being QuadrigaCX. And there's some, almost a couple $100 million worth of crypto that is gone, and that anybody that was storing it in that exchange, it's all over. I'll tell you this quick, this story broke a couple weeks ago. Okay, we just haven't had time to get into it. But again, I want to, there's more to this that I think is very interesting, and so I will cover it eventually, but let's get to the reality of it before we talk about it. But anyway, I will say this. Oh boy, I don't know how many times I've said this, but do not, as much as you can help it, do not store crypto on exchanges. Okay, you get yourself, a Trezor. Okay, that's what I use. I love Trezor. You get yourself a Trezor, get a Model T, whatever. Okay, and you store your shit on that. And you say, well, but they don't support my favorite crypto. Might want to ask yourselves why they don't. I know there's programming issues around that, but regardless, Trezor handles the big stuff: Bitcoin, Zcash, so on. Think about that. So anyway, but we'll get into that story in the future. This one is, I think, a little more concerning to the average person. And not so much the average person, but to more people, and that is CookieMiner. Something people are talking about it, but they're not exactly talking about it enough. But this is pretty concerning stuff. I have a link in the show notes to a story from ZDNet. The concern is here with CookieMiner. Anyway, I'll read the headline: CookieMiner, new malware targets Macs to steal from cryptocurrency wallet. Malware can bypass multi-factor authentication to gain access to cryptocurrency wallets and also drops mining malware on infected machines. Now, this is only affecting Macs. That doesn't mean that this kind of thing doesn't exist for other operating systems. Okay, but this one specifically works for Macs. Here's really the problem with this, is that no one knows exactly how, I mean, they get the concept of how it's doing what it's doing, but no one knows exactly how you initially get infected with this. And that's a concern for me, because like I usually want to tell you, hey, make sure that you're not, make sure you're not doing this. Don't do X, okay, to make sure that you don't get this malware. However, that's the problem, is that we don't really know how this is getting onto machines. We have an idea of what it's exactly doing when there is an OS 10 machine infected, with Mac, OS, with macOS, and it's so funny. It's from a ZDNet show, and they're still calling it OS 10. It's macOS. I'm just like, I'm looking at it right here in front of me, and tech journalists, you want to catch up? I'm not even a Mac guy. Anyway. So here, let me read a little bit of the story. Mac users are being targeted with newly discovered Mac malware that aims to steal the contents of cryptocurrency wallets. Dubbed CookieMiner by researchers because of its capability for stealing browser cookies associated with cryptocurrency exchanges, another warning about exchanges, and wallet service websites visited by the victim, the malware has been uncovered by Palo Alto Networks. In addition to stealing and trading the contents of cryptocurrency wallets, CookieMiner also plants a cryptojacker onto the infected OS 10 machine, their words, it should be macOS, enabling the attackers to secretly mine for additional digital currency. In this instance, it's Kodo, a lesser-known cryptocurrency that offers users anonymity. It's mostly used in Japan. It's still unknown how the newly detected malware gains access to systems, but once there, CookieMiner examines browser cookies with links to cryptocurrency exchanges and websites that reference blockchain. Exchanges targeted include Binance, Coinbase, Poloniex, Bittrex, Bitstamp, and MyEtherWallet. Using a shell script, it steals Google Chrome and Apple Safari browser cookies from the victim's machine, uploading them to a folder on a remote server. By doing this, it can extract the required login credentials and the cookies required to make it look as if the new login attempt is coming from a machine previously used by the victim, therefore preventing it from looking suspect. Quote, what it wants to do in combination with credentials, which it's harvested, is impersonate that user from their own system, says Palo Alto Networks. So they use the cookies to try and get past that initial login without suspicion. So anyway, it says it isn't just the victim's Mac that is targeted by CookieMiner. If the victim has used iTunes to sync their Mac with their iPhone, the malware can also access text messages. This potentially allows the attackers to steal login codes and other messages that they can abuse to bypass any two-factor authentication the users have applied to their cryptocurrency accounts. So, okay, this is another great example of why you want to be using hardware wallets. Hardware specifically designed to handle cryptocurrency. Okay, because if you were using now you could say, well, wait a minute, Stallion. But doesn't Trezor, doesn't that actually access its UI on the device by going through your web browser? Yes. Okay, but there are a few different, especially with the Trezor Model T, and this isn't like, I mean, I don't mind talking about the Trezor Model T. It's not an advertisement for them. I just want people to have their shit secure, because the crypto economy is the economy of the future for now, and I say for now. So, I want people to be as secure as they can within using that, and going with hardware wallets is definitely the way to go. I mean, yes, there's, what about if you want to run Zcash on something? Well, again, you should be using a Linux machine for a lot of that. That's a whole other story. Okay, for your run-of-the-mill cryptos, though, that most people are interested in, use a hardware wallet, because for, to try and send, okay, any crypto from like, say, the Trezor Model T, there is a confirmation screen that comes up on the device itself, on the Trezor itself. It has a little touch screen. There's a confirmation screen that comes up on that, and you have to hit it, and you have to hold it down. Like, I mean, you really have to make sure this is not something you can do by accident, where you can just suddenly send people money, or, whoever is, set up this CookieMiner malware could just send stuff away. That's not going to work that way with this. Okay, so anytime they would try to send some kind of malware or try to take something away, there are so many confirmation dialogues you'd have to go through because of your hardware wallet, that I don't think that this would end up being a concern, as far as I understand how CookieMiner works. Okay, so this is just another example, kind of what we were just talking about. Don't fucking trust the exchanges. It's too hot. They're too hot of a target. Okay, unless, if you're going to do something on exchange, be quick about it. get it done and get out. And maybe every time you leave the exchange, this can bypass two-factor authentication to a degree, so that's kind of a concern. But just really limit what you do on exchanges as much as you can. And that's another thing too, is that the crypto community, the reason that was so cool back when there was more of a community around a lot of cryptos like Bitcoin and so on, was that you could engage in face-to-face transactions where maybe this wasn't so much of a concern. And this stuff was happening automated and by people from afar. That's not to say this still couldn't happen in a person-to-person situation. That certainly did occur at certain crypto events over the years. But regardless, this is, really a rally cry to engage in best practices. And look, if you're playing a long game, you could say, yeah, but a Trezor costs $100 and, just having it on exchange is free. Okay, you pay $100 for security for something that you're, I'm guessing, planning on being a long-term investment. You're not willing to even do that? What the hell's wrong with you? Yeah, it's worth hashing out $100-$150, to get best-in-class security or best-in-industry security for your cryptos to keep this kind of shit from happening. Okay, and again, if you're engaging in a lot of regular crypto work, I would go with a bit of a more first off, a more secure, but also a less hot target, that being some kind of Linux machine that you set up, okay, to make all of that happen. So, I would not be using, macOS is, still a target. Linux certainly is a target as well. And crypto is obviously the ultimate target. Okay, but go somewhere where perhaps there isn't the largest developing environment where people, will end up coming up with a lot of these different things like CookieMiner and so on. And, head over to Linux if you're going to do any like really, really serious. If you're storing serious amounts of crypto, like you should be rocking that anyway. Again, this is that challenge to just go to best practices. And it's concerning because, again, we don't know how macOS machines are getting infected in the first place. And it goes even broader where it can get to your iPhone and all that. Huge, huge issue here. So not to say that there aren't huge issues on Windows either. And, Linux has at points had its day, but man, get on top of that like now, okay, and change your game if you are on Mac, and because again, we don't know how this even infects your machine. So very, very serious. Anyway, that's it for this week in blockchain. We'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo!
Hey baby, I know, you are tired of Gmail. You have had enough. Well, I have a solution for you. What I want you to do is you go to Fastmail, okay? It's fastmail.sovryntech.com. That's the URL you can use. You're going to get a discount with that. You are going to love this. This is email for email's sake. This company does nothing more. Just email, and they do it right. All the latest security technologies. You want to log into your account with your YubiKey? You can do that. Fastmail has your hookup. Very inexpensive plans. I want you to check it out. You go to fastmail.sovryntech.com. That'll get you the hookup, and it's an honor to have them as a part of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
Woo, kind of fitting actually to put this in the climax, because you hear that music and man, I could imagine Jeff Bezos and Miss Lauren Sanchez, which are the much discussed couple of the past month ever since again, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago on Sovryn Tech, and I think it was worth talking about. And I think it's worth talking about again. But there was the divorce between Mackenzie Bezos and Jeff Bezos themselves, and then you find out, holy shit, Jeff's been sending dick pics to, this near 50-year-old woman who is really a full-on entrepreneur, very successful woman. She's been in movies, Fight Club. She's not an actress though. She's been an anchor woman. She runs her own like aerial camera company. It's really impressive. I got to say, Miss Lauren Sanchez, you are one hell of a woman. There's no doubt about that. And I'll admit it, an attractive woman at that. Even, I think plenty of women in their later years are, if you even want to call it that, right? Age is such a funny thing. But, hey, I get it, Jeff, right? So, I mean, conventionally, I'm saying, everybody has different tastes, and it's not exactly not my taste, but conventionally, I understand, what people are talking about here. So anyway, regardless, I covered this on Sovryn Tech. And basically what happened is that the National Enquirer, which I said at the time, I didn't even think anybody took that seriously. Like, I thought that was, it is a tabloid, but I thought it was like pretty much, like I said, just a step above Weekly World News, like that they made up their fucking stories. Like it was all bullshit. But I guess that come to find out, apparently this is quite serious. But regardless, the National Enquirer somehow got their hands on sexy text messages, or sex, between Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez, as well as some pictures between the two. In fact, supposedly, including a picture of Jeff Bezos' dick. And I guess he's well hung, which, hey, good for you, man. To some people, size matters. To some, it doesn't. For those that it does matter to, hey, Jeff Bezos, he's got it packing. Amazingly, just a few days ago, on February 7th, I do follow Jeff Bezos on Twitter. It's like the only social account that he has. Kudos to him for that. And, for not having much of anything else as far as social media goes, as we all should, have very little. And I've never even seen this happen, where a tech exec of a tech giant wrote a post and posted it on Medium. This is unbelievable. And it's almost unprecedented in my opinion. This would be like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, posting on Medium, or, Larry Page or something like that. This sort of thing, at least to my knowledge, doesn't happen very often, if at all. And I was stunned when this came out. And he titled this post that he wrote, "No Thank You, Mr. Pecker," which is fitting and literal, but at the same time is very fitting for, like the reference to the dick pic, and of course, calling somebody like Peckerhead or something like that is a common insult, or it used to be. And I think this is pretty fitting, but I'm not going to read the entirety of this post, but I want to read some of it. Okay. And again, it's titled "No Thank You, Mr. Pecker." And you're going to find out why it's titled that. From Jeff Bezos himself. Here we go. "Something unusual happened to me yesterday. Actually, for me, it wasn't just unusual, it was a first. I was made an offer I couldn't refuse, or at least that's what the top people at the National Enquirer thought. I'm glad they thought that, because it emboldened them to put it all in writing. Rather than capitulate to extortion and blackmail, I've decided to publish exactly what they sent me, despite the personal cost and embarrassment they threaten. AMI, and that's American Media Inc., I think, Stanley breaking in there. Anyway, reading on. AMI, the owner of the National Enquirer, led by David Pecker, so Stanley breaking in again, that's where Mr. Pecker comes from, among other things, recently entered into an immunity deal with the Department of Justice related to their role in the so-called catch and kill process on behalf of President Trump and his election campaign. Mr. Pecker and his company have also been investigated for various actions they've taken on behalf of the Saudi government." Now, Stallion breaking in here for a second. I think he was on Fox News, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia came out and said, "No, we have no involvement with the National Enquirer, blah, 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 blah." Now, Bezos is going to go on in this post that he wrote and basically say that, oh, no, basically what's the threat that was made is that AMI told Bezos, "Look, we will consider not publishing some of this content." We'll talk more about what the content is. "We'll consider not publishing some more of this content because there's more pictures, maybe there's more text, who knows. If you recant your position, Jeff Bezos, and of course Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, so he has some say, one could argue, within the within the media industry, or within the news industry. And, and stop saying that AMI has any connection to Trump or foreign governments, particularly perhaps like Saudi Arabia." That's kind of the basic gist here. I may not be quoting it exactly, but, the link is in the show notes for you to get the exact quotes on the matter. Regardless, let's read on. So, and here we go. And sometimes, reading on, and sometimes Mr. David Pecker mixes, or Mr. Pecker, actually, he says directly Mr. Pecker, which I'm sure Bezos loved just typing that out. Mr. Pecker mixes it all together. Quote, after Mr. Trump became president, he rewarded Mr. Pecker's loyalty with a White House dinner to which the media executive brought a guest with important ties to the royals in Saudi Arabia. At the time, Mr. Pecker was pursuing business there while also hunting for financing for acquisitions, end quote. Federal investigators and legitimate media have, of course, suspected and proved that Mr. Pecker has used the Inquirer and AMI for political reasons, and yet AMI keeps claiming otherwise. Quote, American media emphatically rejects any assertion that its reporting was instigated, dictated, or influenced in any manner by external forces, political or otherwise, end quote. Of course, legitimate media have been challenging that assertion for a long time. Anyway, he has links to all of these stories, by the way, that Jeff Bezos is referencing. Bezos really did... He did the yeoman's work in this one. Of course, I'm sure he had a lot of yeomans to do it for him, but regardless. I didn't know much about most of that a few weeks ago when intimate text messages from me were published in the National Enquirer. He goes on. Anyway, interestingly, he starts talking about how he started an investigation on AMI over the leaked text messages and the leaked pictures. But anyway, I'm going to skip ahead. Here's a piece of context. My ownership of the Washington Post is a complexifier for me. It's unavoidable that certain powerful people who experience Washington Post news coverage will wrongly conclude I am their enemy. President Trump is one of those people, obvious by his many tweets. Also, the Post's essential and unrelenting coverage of the murder of its columnist Jamal Khashoggi is undoubtedly unpopular in certain circles. So this, of course, is the case where a journalist was supposedly offed by the Saudi government for, journalistic investigation. This is a very, very ugly story. I'm not going to talk about that right now. But anyway, I want to give Bezos a little bit of credit for his self-awareness. Of course he had to know it, but, really for being open about the fact that, I own the Washington Post. I realize that this creates perhaps conspiracy theory around me or, conflicting interests and a lot of other stuff. Conflict of interest. And, well, anyway, He goes on here, even though the Post is a complexifier for me, I do not at all regret my investment. The Post is a critical institution with a critical mission. My stewardship, interesting that Bezos uses that term, because that means he doesn't have any say, he's just making sure that it runs. My stewardship of the Post and my support of its mission, which will remain unswerving, is something I will be most proud of when I'm 90 and reviewing my life, if I'm lucky enough to live that long, regardless of any complexities it creates for me. Anyway, I want to skip ahead some more. And he goes on to talk about how that basically, he explains more of the threat that was made by AMI. Okay, so you have that. But then also he talks about how after what, came out, after it was public about what the National Enquirer was doing about, this situation with Bezos and Ms. Sanchez, others stepped up to the plate and said that basically AMI and the National Enquirer did the same thing to them, but they capitulated. But after receiving effectively the extortion or blackmail, here's what he says. After he gets the email of what they're going to potentially expose. I'll list off what was potentially exposed or could potentially be exposed in a minute. He says, well, it got my attention when he got the blackmail effectively, but not in the way they likely hoped. Any personal embarrassment AMI could cause me takes a back seat because there's a much more important matter involved here. If in my position I can't stand up to this kind of extortion, how many people can? And he goes on to talk about how numerous people came forward to him and said, they capitulated, like I was saying. Reading on, in the AMI letters I'm making public, you will see the precise details of their extortionate proposal. And he goes on, he says, if we do not agree to affirmatively publicize that specific, let me read it here. They will publish the personal photos unless Gavin DeBecker and I make the specific false public statement to the press that we, quote, have no knowledge or basis for suggesting that AMI's coverage was politically motivated or influenced by political forces, end quote. If we do not agree to affirmatively publicize that specific lie, they say they'll publish the photos and quickly. And there's an associated threat. They'll keep the photos on hand and publish them in the future if we ever deviate from that lie. Be assured, Bezos goes on, be assured, no real journalists ever propose anything like what is happening to me here. I will not report embarrassing information about you if you do X for me. And if you don't do X quickly, I will report the embarrassing information. Now, Stallion, breaking in for a second. Actually, I imagine this is an incredibly common practice. Would I also say, though, that no real journalist would actually do this? Yes, of course. I mean, this is not a journalistic, you're no longer a journalistic institution if you're engaging in blackmail and extortion. Okay, you either report the truth or you don't. And if you don't report the truth, or if you don't report, what you find, then are you really a journalist, right? So, I mean, I get Bezos's point, but I don't know that this is, and I'm not going to say that the Washington Post is somehow like just a ton of real journalists or something. I'm not that much on his side here. But anyway, he says, he ends it off with, I prefer to stand up, roll this log over, and see what crawls out. So here's the deal. Let's talk about what they threatened to put out there. Here's 9 images. Okay. Let's see. One is Mr. Bezos' face selfie at what appears to be a business meeting. No big deal there. Supposedly those sent to Miss Sanchez. Miss Sanchez's response: a photograph of her smoking a cigar in what appears to be a simulated oral sex scene. Woo! Way to go. Go Bezos and Miss Sanchez. I think that's fantastic. I want to send a selfie of me at some business meeting. No, I don't want to be in a business meeting, but I want to send a selfie of me and then get something like that back. Hell yes. This is wonderful. Anyway, I'll talk more about this in a second. Here we go. This is the next one. A shirtless Mr. Bezos holding his phone in his left hand while wearing his wedding ring. Oh no. He's wearing either tight black cargo pants or shorts. Good for you. Always wear triple black, Mr. Bezos. Anyway, and his semi-erect manhood is penetrating the zipper of said garment. A full-length body selfie of Mr. Bezos wearing just a pair of tight black boxer briefs or trunks with his phone in his left hand while wearing his wedding ring. Let's be clear, folks. We've talked about this years ago or a couple years ago, and people can look up the pictures. I mean, Bezos is jacked these days. He looks like Vin Diesel. Looks like the fucking Terminator out there, and he's wearing the short sleeves or even the vest to make it happen. I mean, hey, if you got it, flaunt it. That's all I got to say. I don't have any problem with Bezos taking these kind of pictures. Next picture is a selfie of Mr. Bezos fully clothed. Next picture, a full-length, scantily clad body shot with short trunks. Oh, no. And then the next one, a naked selfie in a bathroom while wearing his wedding ring. Mr. Bezos is wearing nothing but a white towel, and the top of his pubic region can be seen. Oh, dear. Next picture, Ms. Sanchez wearing a plunging red neckline dress revealing her cleavage and a glimpse of her nether region. Ooh. Okay, next, Ms. Sanchez wearing a 2-piece red bikini with gold detailed dress revealing her cleavage. Oh no, how dare you have tits? And how dare you show them off to the world or in private, through a picture that you take as a text message. I mean, yeah, the world, wow, we need to see this, right? No, we don't. But anyway. So those are the pictures that basically AMI, National Enquirer, are threatening Bezos with, okay? And that they'll release them. And Bezos is saying, basically, and I got to give him credit, he's saying, fuck you. Go ahead, publish them. In fact, if I was Bezos, here's what I'd do. If I was Bezos, I'd say, you know what? I'm going to give you some more pictures. Here, tell you what, I'll take the towel off. And take the towel off and take the full money. And send that picture right to AMI, courtesy of Mr. Pecker. Say, here's one for, from Pecker to Pecker. Here you go. That's what I would do. I just go all out. And this is perhaps the most amazing thing in all of this. Okay, now I'm not saying that Bezos is any kind of great guy, but I look at this and I am in awe of the fact that maybe for the first time, someone is owning up to the fact that they're a freak. Someone of Jeff Bezos's, shall we say, stature in our society. Okay, I'm not saying I agree with statures in society or the class system, blah, blah, fuck it, whatever. That's not even part of the conversation. But basically, conventionally, someone like Jeff Bezos in Jeff Bezos's position is saying, oh, you bet your ass, I did it all. And just riding with it. and saying, you go ahead and publish them, but I am not going to recant the hit pieces, perhaps, that he's claiming that AMI has done either for President Trump or Saudi Arabia. But I repeat myself, because, I mean, have you ever seen Better Bosom Buddies holding the world together? Well, no, all right, never mind. That maybe that wasn't the Saudis. Regardless, this is unbelievable. Okay, like, I mean, this is, I don't think people are realizing just how big a deal this is. Jeff Bezos, I don't like to use these terms, but I'm going to use it. Jeff Bezos is effectively going to war for the freaks. I don't exactly know, me personally, I don't exactly know what the fuck people are worried about anyway, if a nude picture of them, or the fact that they're like sending texts to a mistress or whatever the hell, or, maybe there was an open relationship or something like this. Like, I don't exactly understand what the concern is. Like, do companies or do, maybe, I don't know, actors and actresses, and I know for women, they have a much harder time. I mean, because them being nude is a much hotter commodity for obvious reasons than a guy, having nude pictures out. So I want to be empathetic towards, what women have to deal with in this case. But I don't understand what people are you worried like the Christians won't go see your movie, or the Christians won't frequent Amazon anymore? I mean, and maybe Bezos feels confident enough to do this. Maybe he's the first one that can do this, because Bezos knows that Amazon has everybody by the balls, right? That, like, okay, go ahead, boycott me, try. And that's a very valid point to bring up. We talked about this a few times over the years during the Amazon World Domination Tour that I've been discussing, where Amazon is even more, every little way, they're just worming into every little industry, worming into every little part of your purchasing power life. Try and boycott Amazon. It's a lot harder than you think, especially if you like ebooks or even audiobooks. It becomes very difficult. You have to become pretty tech savvy to pull that one off, because you're going to have to rock the torrent sites. Oh no, torrents! So maybe he feels he's the first private individual, not a politician, who's in a position to say, fuck you, to any attempt at extortion or any attempt to try and defame him, or whatever, engage in, we're going to share dick pics, we're going to share this, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, yeah, go ahead, because you know what? It doesn't matter. I own all of your asses. It does not matter. You're still going to shop with me. You're still going to want 2-day shipping. You're still going to want the best prices on the planet. You're still going to want your ebooks. You're still going to want your Audible account. You're still going to want, just keep going down the list. You're still going to want your Ring video doorbell so you can spy on your children like the idiots and scumbags that you are. I mean, people that have been listening to this show for 7 years, I'm not a fan of this guy, but I got to tell you, he has earned some points from me for pretty much coming out and saying, motherfucker, you go ahead and you post those pictures, you share them all, and I don't care, because I'm not backing down from the fact that you are part of some kind of ugly system out there, whatever it is. Or if maybe it's just to get back at President Trump for all of the bullshit that Trump has been, lobbying against Amazon. Maybe it has to do with that. Who knows what the actual quote unquote war is behind the scenes. But regardless, look, if those pictures, they should have been private pictures. I don't think they should be getting posted, out in public. But if it's going to get out there, let it get out there. And then let's start accepting that everybody, even some guy from Seattle who started a little science fiction book company back in 96 or whatever year it was, that everybody's a fucking freak. And that we can stop chastising ourselves over this. I mean, imagine what they were, again, Bezos said a lot of people came forward and messaged or called Jeff or whatever, visited him and said, oh man, the National Enquirer did the same thing to me. I mean, look at how effectively, these kinds of organizations, this kind of quote unquote journalism, or this kind of like this part of the news industry is holding so many people hostage. And when you hold people hostage and you hold their tongues hostage, you ultimately hold the truth hostage. And that means it's not getting out there. And this weapon of vilifying sexuality, of vilifying perhaps even non-monogamy, of vilifying, people's choices in their relationships that, look, you got to follow your heart where it goes. Like I was saying last time, when we talked about this whole Jeff Bezos and Miss Lauren Sanchez situation. Okay. Let's just accept that you got to do that and that's normal and that these things, this is part of the program. I would argue to you that people in these other, echelons, these upper echelons of society, they live non-monogamous, wild, crazy sexual lifestyles anyway. Some of which I'm sure are great, others which may be pretty fucking sick. And I mean that like not in, I mean that in like in a genuinely sick, like disturbing way. Okay. I'm not, knocking freaks when I say something is, sometimes when something is sick, like it's a positive thing, right? Because it's just kind of freaky. This is where I mean, like it's genuinely twisted and fucked up in the head. Okay. And what those things are, that's a whole other conversation. But bottom line is that I think, people in the upper echelons do this anyway. Now it's coming out and it's getting public. Is this a byproduct of the internet never forgets and the internet is, like kind of setting information free in a very real way? Sure, I think that might be a very big part of this. And I think that there's actually a small degree of comfort, but at the same time concern that even someone like Jeff Bezos can't keep his fucking dick pics private, and can't keep his sex messages private. And that raises all other kinds of concerns of just how, screwed everything might be as far as security goes, as far as privacy goes. If Bezos can't get it, who can? Well, I would argue that you can, and, it would be interesting to find out how all of this really, ended up becoming a thing. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised. All right, I'm going to lay out, because just for full disclosure, no pun intended there, for full disclosure of the situation, I could almost believe if someone wanted to get conspiratorial, if you wanted a hot take on this, is that this is Bezos taking out his competition for the Washington Post. And not that I thought National Enquirer was competition, but maybe other properties of AMI, which is the parent company, could be competition for the Washington Post. This could be some, really, this could be a business move. This could be a total marketing play. Because again, like I said accurately, Bezos does really have everybody by the balls, and he's a person who I don't think there's going to be any money lost if his dick pic gets out. As to where that could be a very different situation. Like right now, maybe the biggest actor, biggest name in Hollywood right now is probably The Rock, right? If some ugly shit got out about The Rock, yeah, that could probably ruin his career in some way. I wish we would get past that, that just goes to speak about how sadly conservative our society still is, and it really needs to get past that. Not even just Christian, but also conservative, to where, if a picture of The Rock's dick, or the fact that, look, The Rock's not married. I love The Rock. I'm not making fun of him here. I'm just saying, like, if he's, doing his thing, they have an open relationship, whatever. If that came out, yeah, he'd probably lose some points and wouldn't be able to work with Disney, because Disney's got to be family friendly, even though they're making rated R Deadpool movies now. It's also fucked up. Just fucking drop it all. But, I just want to raise that, okay, maybe there's a conspiracy here. Maybe there's a different angle here. Maybe there's a hot take to have that this is very carefully planned by Bezos. It's a, shall we say, nuclear option, not like with an actual bomb, but, a nuclear option to wipe out some of his competition. It's hard. I find that hard to believe, though, because this is, I don't know what happened here. I'd love to find out how this got leaked. Maybe it was part of, what kind of phone does Bezos even use? Does he use an iPhone? Was this part of like the Fappening leaks from iCloud or something? These are questions that I think would do well to have answered. I think Bezos could, maybe, if Bezos wanted to really capitalize on this, come out with that Amazon messaging app that, and say, look, no, this messaging app could have, don't let what happened to me happen to you. Like, that could be the marketing for Bezos, right? Don't let what happened to me happen to you. This messaging app, will protect your dick pics. And, or your gal sending you a hot picture of her, swallowing a cigar or something. I think that would do gangbusters. Not gangbangers, gangbusters. Thank you. but take advantage of this. Go all the way. I mean, if he's really going to take advantage of this and get out in front and see what crawls out, I think there's a lot more going on here than we're ever going to know. Okay, and there's going to be a lot more revealed, I think, in the future. I mean, he specifically said it. Let's see what crawls out of this. This could get pretty ugly. It's also interesting that this starts happening around re-election time for President Trump. There's a lot of interesting things around timing with all of this. But basically, just at face value, there is something to appreciate here in that Bezos is letting his freak flag fly. And I could not be happier about that. And I will, for perhaps one of the first times in my life, or at least one of the rare times, kudos, Jeff Bezos. I will wave my freak flag with you. The Golden Stallion will stand by your side and say, baby, post those pictures. Whoop, let him go. Anyway, that's it for this week's Sovryn Tech. We went into a little bit of overtime, but we'll end it there. But this is a huge deal. This story is going to have ramifications culturally, politically, otherwise, I think, for a long time to come. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Sorry, I know, I said long, I said come. Oh, shit. Anyway, that's it. I will see all of you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.